You're listening to the Today's Eden podcast, episode 14. I don't even know how to start the introduction to this one. Let me just say that I feel like I am getting the biggest blessing out of this podcast, being able to have a reason to pursue other women and to hear their different journeys. I feel like I am selfishly benefiting from this podcast more than those who I'm actually making it for, because every time I talk to somebody else, whether it's somebody I know or somebody I have never met, I always walk away feeling so glad that this has brought me to them and that I was able to either experience what they experienced on an emotional level or gained a greater understanding of it, or even grasp the concept of it physically. Coming off of my daughter's 7th birthday, this episode definitely made me realize and have such a bigger perspective on the things that I am rejoicing in, that others are fighting for those exact things. So if you're 1 in 8 women, these words that you're about to hear, this episode that you're going to listen to, is going to feel super heavy because the pain is deep, it's suffocating, and it can be definitely very lonely. And you are fighting for a life that may or may never be. So you guys, today this episode is with my friend Nikki, and she's amazing, and she did such a good job at sharing her story and just speaking life into women who might be going into this journey that she went through or have already done it. And I'm talking about PCOS, IUI, IVF, infertility. She talks about all that in her story. And so I'm just so grateful for Nikki's braveness in sharing this super intimate story. And that I hope you guys know that with or without a baby, although I know you'd rather it be with, that you are valuable, you are whole, and you matter, and you are not alone in this struggle. If you're like me, you have absolutely zero time to sit down and physically read a book, but putting headphones on is pretty easy. You can try Audible for free for 30 days at audibletrial.com/todayseden. Check out some of the books our guests have mentioned on the show that they found most influential. Thanks for listening in today, and let's get to today's episode. Hey girl, thanks so much for kicking your hubby out of the house and sneaking away to spend some time with me on the show this evening.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here and to talk about something that's extremely dear and important to my walk with the Lord and just the story of my life and how we built a family. So I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And thank you for being so open to sharing about something so personal. And I asked you on because as mothers, we are called to go down our journey in lots of different ways. And sometimes it's a little bit easier than others. And when we decide to have a family, that's a huge decision in the first place. But then, when it becomes a journey, that's when we come upon challenges and, different things along the way. So would you mind sharing with us your journey to becoming a parent?
Absolutely. So my husband and I, TJ, we had been married for about 5 years. After college, we immediately got married, and we kind of had this 5-year plan of travel and paying off our student loans and buying a house and all those fun things that make you an adult, I guess.
Right.
And so it came up to that 5 years, and we were like, okay, what do we do now? And I was like, well, are we ready to have kids? And we said yes. This was probably something I always had a slight intuition in, that building a family for us might not be as simple as possible. Mm-hmm. I had some other diagnosis early on, starting in high school, of like polycystic ovaries and their way of treating that in the meantime is just to put you on birth control, and it kind of helps everything. And then they don't really discuss it with you until you really are ready to have children. And so that's kind of where we were at. So after, trying for several months with no success, in fact, not even really having a consistent cycle, I sought out just my normal OBGYN, and he said, okay, well, let's, just start running some tests. And we kind of started off easy, just checking hormone levels and doing Clomid, which is typically, it's just an oral medication. It's relatively inexpensive, although it's still not covered by insurance. That kind of helps you regulate a cycle and actually ovulate at a certain time so that you can have a slight chance of getting pregnant. So we did that for about 6 months unsuccessfully. And so we came to that point in time of my OBGYN can no longer do anything else for us. And so we need to seek out an reproductive endocrinologist, which, is just an infertility specialist at that point. So it's just a fancy name for a really expensive doctor. So, we got a few recommendations and ultimately picked a physician, Dr. Gata. He's actually out of Southlake. He was very convenient to where I was working in Coppell at the time, because you do end up going to this doctor almost every other day.
Really?
And so it was important for it to be, yes, it consumes your life, and I'll get into that later about how you not make that an idol. But so you chose this doctor, and we immediately, from the day we, went in, I was already on a round of Clomid. And so I happened to be at a point where I was ovulating. And so he was like, well, we can do an IUI like this weekend, which is, intrauterine insemination. Okay. And we were at a point where we were ready to be aggressive with this. And so we said yes. We actually ended up doing 4 IUIs, and all of them failed. And so at this point, we've been trying treatments for a year at this point after 4 IUIs. So we had a vacation plan in January of 2014. And we said, okay, after that vacation, we're come back and we're going to do an IVF. And IVF are incredibly expensive, but the doctor made it feel like this was going to be a slam dunk. They're like, you're so young and your problem is just ovulating. And so I think that if we just take it all out and, do it in a petri dish and then, insert the embryo back in you, I don't think you'll have any problems getting pregnant. So we felt like, okay, we could afford the procedure, we could do this, and we're going to get pregnant. We were very, very confident. Right. And I think that's probably why it was so, we went through the IVF, we ended up having one really decent embryo and one that was not so decent. It wasn't good enough to freeze. So we ended up putting both back, and that did not result in a pregnancy. And that was very devastating, because not only do you ache for a child at this point, but you have just dropped a significant amount of money for a chance of being pregnant, and it didn't work.
Right. And not only that, but like you said, he made it sound like it was going to be a slam dunk. So I'm sure you guys were already coming back like hopes high and ready to basically hear like, congrats,
Yes. And so at that point, you're like, okay, is it just a fluke? Do we really have something else going on here? And so, for us, we had the finances to do it again. And so we thought, okay, well, surely, they were so confident. The doctors were dumbfounded. They had no idea why it didn't work. They put their team together on our case, and they just couldn't believe it didn't work. And so once again, we still had this really, really exaggerated sense of hope that, of course, the next one's going to be a slam dunk, right? We changed medicine protocols, and IVFs are not for the faint of heart. I mean, you're giving yourself shots, 4 times a day, and
so explain that, because for somebody who doesn't know what an IVF is, explain that to me, because I have no idea. Like, that just sounds like a one visit thing, but what entails in doing that?
Okay, so you start by going, they put you on a birth control so they can get you on their schedule,
Uh-huh.
the doctor's schedule. And basically, once you stop that birth control, you have a medicine protocol. And there's all sorts of different kinds of medicines that do the same thing, but each person reacts to them differently.
Mm.
And so, what they're trying to do is they're trying to grow as many follicles, or eggs, as some people would call them, as possible inside your ovaries.
Mm. Okay.
And so they give you these medicines, they're shots, and they stimulate an overgrowth of eggs and mature follicles. So you do that for about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on your medical protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go under general anesthesia and they harvest those eggs from you. They remove them.
Okay.
And it's a relatively painful process, so that's why you're under general anesthesia. It really only takes them about 15 or 20 minutes to do it, but
Mm-hmm.
you go in, it's almost like a little bit of a day surgery, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And they remove those eggs. And typically, from me, that would always produce about 19 follicles.
Okay.
So at that point, your ovaries are very heavy, you're very uncomfortable. You're ready to get those eggs out of your body.
Okay.
So they remove them.
Mm-hmm.
And then during that time, while you're under anesthesia, your husband is also giving his donation.
Okay.
And then they put the sperm and the egg together and allow them to inseminate one another to create actual embryos.
Okay.
Um, and then you wait about 5 days. And over those 5 days, some of those embryos will no longer progress, so they will remain immature,
Mm-hmm.
and then they will eventually progress into what they call a blastocyst, which is pretty much a full-grown embryo that's about to hatch.
Mm.
And that's really what they want to see when you go back 5 days later and they insert the embryo back into the uterine lining, and hopefully it sticks,
Right.
basically.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so each IVF cycle, you would get 19 eggs, but really in the end, we would only end up with 2 to 3 follicles to even try to put back. So, like in our second IVF, we ended up with 3. So, we put 2 back inside the uterine lining and we froze another one for later, and hoping that would be a sibling later on.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So yeah, they basically freeze them and then they're preserved. And then, if you come back a few years later and you're like, okay, we want to try our other embryo for a brother or a sister, then they unthaw it and you just go back through the putting back process into the uterus.
Mm. Okay.
So once again, in our second IVF, 2 embryos failed. We did not result in a pregnancy, but we had our one frozen embryo. And we lovingly named him Hans because he's frozen like Hans.
That's awesome.
You have to have a sense of humor in this process because there's nothing there's nothing fun about it.
Right. Get your kicks where you can get them.
Yeah, I mean, we've taken all the fun out of baby making in this process. So we have to come up with our own sense of humor. So at that point, we're emotionally exhausted. I'm physically exhausted. The meds make you crazy. So imagine your worst day on PMS. You feel like that for months on end because your hormones are just raging through your body in unnormal amounts.
That is not safe.
Probably not. And so for us, that was probably when we really started seeking counseling. For us as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
One of the really, we kind of talked earlier and you talked about, how do you go through this with your spouse and end up okay on the other side of it?
Right.
And I would say at that point, after that second IVF, we were definitely on different pages. TJ, is very similar to most men in the fact that when you have a problem, well, he wants to fix it.
Right.
And he cannot fix this problem.
Right.
And so he feels helpless as your, earthly protector, that he cannot keep you from this pain and from what your body is going through and what you're emotionally going through. And so, and then as a female, all we want to do is probably talk about it to death, right?
Right.
So, him being the only person who's really experiencing this with you, TJ did an excellent job of attending as many doctor's appointments as possible with me. He was just extremely supportive, and he would help give me shots, and he was there every step of the way. And I think he was at a point, he's probably always been more open to building a family in a different way. He's never felt like he needed a family that came directly from us and, that had all of our same facial features and whatnot. And so he hit that point very early on, way before I did. I was the one that was like, I'm not discussing adoption. I'm not discussing anything else. We are going to do this. You know what I mean? It is going to happen. And so I think at that point we were just on very different pages, and we did not know how to express our feelings to one another. And so we did seek counseling just for us to give us a space to talk about it. So at this point in time, we were both full on in our careers. I actually had gone back to school and was working on my master's degree at this point. And so we were just very busy. We had a lot of stuff going on, and we would not give each other space to discuss this. So counseling gave us that space. We did it together, and basically we just kind of talked about where we were in each process and what was going on. And our counselor did a fantastic, she also struggled with infertility. And so she did a fantastic job of facilitating just some conversation for us. It's so important to actually lean into one another and give each other a lot of grace, because ultimately you're the only two people that know how this feels, because you're the one you're going through it with one another.
Right.
And
did your counselor give you guys any certain exercises to do that you can remember that would be beneficial for others to know about? Or just facilitating conversation was probably the main?
It was really just giving us a space to talk about it, because like I said, we were so busy, and a lot of times I would feel like I had to get everything done. So I was going to work, and then there's the housework of maintaining a house, and then I would have homework because I'm going to school, and then finally it'd be really, really late at night, and that was my time to finally process what was going on in our life, and then I would bring it up. Well, at that point, TJ's exhausted too, and he doesn't want to talk about it. And so for us, counseling gave us a space and time, an hour every week, to discuss it and to talk about it when we were both focused on that at the moment, because we both processed it at different times. So with TJ, it was kind of there and it was fine, but he doesn't really feel the need to talk about it all the time. But for me, I wouldn't even think about it or discuss it until everything else in my day had wound down. But that wasn't a great time for TJ to talk about it. Right. It just wasn't for him. And so for us, it gave us space. She did, for us, we were so busy, and that's both our nature, is to constantly be busy and working on something and being productive. And so we had to figure out how to just be and let that be enough. And so sometimes it was just sitting on the couch and literally doing nothing and just being in that space and time, allowing ourselves to feel the emotion of what we're going through, to allow ourselves time to grieve whatever step we were in that process. Because, infertility is just one of those things that it's this disease that affects every aspect of your life. It affects your relationships with your spouse, your family. It affects the way you interact with your friends. It affects your finances, which is something that's always stressful in most marriages anyways. Right. And it just kind of permeates into every crack of your life. And, you have to grieve the fact you're not grieving someone or something. It's not tangible. You're grieving what never will be, or what you hope will be, but you don't know that it will actually happen. And that's hard to articulate, I think, for some women. And I think that's what makes this a very lonely process, is that it's difficult to understand by someone who is not experiencing what you're going through.
Right. How can us from the outside support a couple going through infertility, whether that's couple to couple or like woman to woman? Because I know that sometimes when we're on the outside, it's like, well, we don't want to bring it up because we don't want to upset you, but also, so how can we better support each other in that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So I had actually some fantastic friends that walked through my journey with me. Some of them were women who had experienced the same trial themselves. And so they kind of knew what to say. And then some of them didn't, but that they were just sensitive. But I think the biggest thing that friends and what women can do for each other is to give grace. And what I mean by that and what that looks like is you have to kind of keep that in your forefront. I'm not talking about walking on eggshells. I'm talking about you just don't know what emotion that brings. You can wake up one morning and you're okay with where you're at, and then you can wake up the next morning and you're just sad. And there's nothing particular that triggers that. It's just where you are emotionally. And if friends can just give you grace and know that, if you seem sad or if you don't seem yourself, that's okay, and that they can just love you in that moment and for who you are and what you're going through at that moment. That is the most Christ-like behavior that a friend can offer someone who's going through infertility.
Right.
Um,
It's okay.
Absolutely. No, you're fine. Some things to absolutely don't do. Please do not say the cliche thing of it's all in his timing. That's like the worst thing you can say. And, also it will happen because technically you don't know that it will happen.
Right.
God might have a different way that their family is going to grow. And so, and don't withhold, when you're in this stage of life and your friends around you are becoming pregnant and having kids. I can honestly tell you from experience, you feel happy for your friends. You really, really do. It's not even a feeling of jealousy that overcomes you. You just feel sad because it's a reminder that you don't have that same joy for yourself. And, but the best thing to do is to not withhold your good news or try to hide it, because then it makes the person going through infertility feel different, like they're being treated differently, and they don't want to be treated differently.
Right.
So be upfront and be sensitive to the situation, but invite them to your baby shower and let them decide if they want to come. They might be having a great day and they're at a point in their cycle where they're hopeful and they want to come to your baby shower. And, if they don't because they just found out the day before that it didn't work and they are not pregnant, then at least you gave them the choice. You didn't not offer the choice. So invite them to your baby shower because I went to plenty of baby showers and it was so fun to ooh and ah over all the sweet little things that the babies need and get to wear and whatnot. But it just kind of depended on the day and where we were at and what we were going on to. But I loved having the choice. And then just once again, the grace of, hey, if I don't come, you probably know why. And you're okay with that. You're going to love me anyways for, I'm still celebrating with you. It's not personal. It's just, it's where I'm at,
Right.
Let's see.
So you guys did your second round, right? And then what happened after that? So you had a frozen.
So that didn't work.
You had Hans. We were at Hans.
We had Hans. We did have Hans. And what's so funny is I had this. So this happened like probably in April. It's our second failed IVF at this point. We literally went first and second were back to back. So like I said, we were very aggressive with our treatment. We had, we were fortunate enough to have the funds sitting there in a bank account. And so we were able to just go back, bam, bam, back to back. And so at that point, I'm emotionally ravaged. I'm exhausted. And I do feel a prompting for September. And so, I said, TJ, I just feel like we need to wait. I need to just get myself together right now. I cannot go through with any more treatments and said, I think we need to wait for September. I think that Hans is going to work, because at this point we've named him or her or whatever this embryo is at this point. So I feel a prompting for September. And so we tried Hans in September. So a frozen embryo transfer is very simple. There's a little bit of a medicine protocol, but it's typically only like one shot a day. So it's much more simple, a lot less stressful, a lot less doctor's appointments. And then they just unthaw the embryo, and then they place the embryo back into the uterus and hope it's taken. So at this point, I'm super hopeful, because I've felt a prompting from the Lord for September. And I think, we've named him. I have an emotional connection with this embryo, and this is going to work. So once again, I am overly helpful. Hopeful. Well, Hans did not work.
Oh my gosh.
So at this point, we've done 2. We've spent, at this point, you could have bought a car for what we've spent in trying to have a baby.
So and that's kind of and insurance doesn't cover. Or do they cover part of that, or do they not cover part of that?
They covered nothing. We paid, it is all cash.
So if you're going, wow, that's kind of mind-blowing to me, because I feel like that's something that should be, I just don't understand. I don't understand. I think that should, to me, that building something as big and heavy as wanting to be a mother, like I feel like that is something that should be helped in some way. You know what I mean? Like I feel like as much as you're going through, like you're talking about all these things that you're going through emotionally in your body and, in your marriage and stuff, like the least that they could do is, help your bank account a little bit. Like, I just,
yes.
Like, yeah, obviously you agree. 'Cause
it's it's about $10,000 to $12,000 round of IVF.
Wow. I don't know. That's insane.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's crazy. Okay. Yeah, Hans didn't work. So at this point, you're like, okay, what is our limits? Are we going to keep throwing money at this and for a chance and not fall pregnant, or do we need to really start saving and putting our money toward an actual child? So this is really when we really started considering adoption. This is at the point in time when I really started opening up my heart to and seeking the Lord into what did I want to have a baby that came from me, and I wanted to have a pregnancy and all that goes with that, or did I want to parent a child? And those are just some difficult questions that I had to look inside myself and decide what I could do. And really it was out of fear. So I was not one of those people and children growing up. It's like, oh, I want to grow up and be a mommy. That I was not that person. And so having a family to me was something that I really considered as an adult. And I just didn't have that ultra long yearning to be a mom my whole entire life. And so I just had to decide what we were doing. And so that just during this time frame of all this stuff, I'm just trying to seek the Lord and like, okay, what is this family going to look like? Like I said, TJ had arrived to that conclusion and was very comfortable with adoption way before I did. But this is really the point in time where I had to sit down with myself and look inwardly and say, can I love a child that does not come from me? And, my husband asked me a very astute question, and he referenced some friends of ours that, we love their son. He was like, well, if something happened to, our friends, Jackie and Aaron, would you not love their kids like they were your own if we took them into our home? And I looked at him and I teared up and I said, absolutely, I could. And that was for me that eye-opening moment where I can do this. And it is also a reflection of, yes, we are all God's children, but, if God can love me, then certainly I can love any child and know that and get to know that child as intimately as I would if I'd carried him or her in my own womb. And so for me, that's kind of where I was at. The fertility doctors at this point they have a whole team on our case, and they still do not know why we were pregnant. they can't believe it. Because at this point, I'm only like 28 years old, and um, they can't believe it. So they offered us a very wonderful offer, and they waived all of their clinic fees for us. So we only had to pay for meds and the procedure of retrieving the eggs again and putting the embryos back. So we felt like for that cost, it was worth one more try. That I felt like I could pursue adoption if I got a chance to do this one more time. And because they were like, basically, you just have really old eggs. You have the eggs of a 40-year-old.
Okay.
I said, okay. So, and they said typically with our 40-year-old women, it takes 2 to 3 to 4 IVF tries. So it's like, okay, well, if my eggs are 40 years old, even though I'm in this 28-year-old body, then maybe the third time's a charm.
Right.
And you're offering us this opportunity at kind of a discounted rate. And so we decided to go for it. There were some other things along the way that we had changed. I didn't clean my own house with any chemical products. I didn't pump my own gas at this point. I'm only eating organic meat. I mean, we completely changed our lifestyle in preparation of getting the best possible eggs to pursue this third IVF. So it was right before Christmas. We did our third IVF round, and we actually ended up with 4 embryos to work with. And we had 2 embryos that were our best quality embryos we had ever had. In the fertility world, all the doctors kind of take December off. So we ended up freezing all of those embryos, letting my body calm down. Studies have been shown now that you have more success with frozen embryo transfers than fresh embryo transfers because your body has kind of calmed down from all the medication that you've been pumping into it for the past month to even produce that many eggs.
Right.
And so we took December off, and in January of 2015, we put 2 embryos back again. So at this point, we're not trying for twins because we've had 5 embryos that we've put back that were unsuccessful. And so putting 2 back is a typical protocol for that when you've had so many that don't work that you don't really expect for them both to take.
Right.
But we did put our best 2 embryos back, and that is how we got an Eli and an Emmy.
Yay.
So it finally worked.
Yeah, I can't tell you when I saw you, like the announcement, it was one of those things like, yes, fine, like, yes, you're just like cheering for you guys and stuff. And yeah, that was awesome. So
I, when you go in for that beta test, and, I was not a tester in between, so I did not, do at-home pregnancy tests in between. I would wait till the last possible minute when they actually do the blood draw to actually see if you're pregnant and check your beta levels. And I got the call when I was at work, and I answered the phone, and she told me that I was pregnant and that my beta levels were, in the 500s, which indicated a possible twin pregnancy. And I fell to my knees in shock and prayer of thanksgiving. That we had, finally fallen pregnant. At least I knew that I could get pregnant at that point, so.
Right.
So that's kind of, a simplified version of, our medical side of our journey that led to, and we still have those 2 other embryos, because there were 4 in that group. And so we still have 2 embryos that were frozen that we hope eventually, will be siblings for Eli and Emmy. If they don't, then I will be completely satisfied with the 2 wonderful gifts that we have been given. But we also, feel called to give those embryos that we've created a chance of life. That was one of the things that, as a Christian, when we were entertaining the thought of IVF, we struggled with was, is this of God? Is this okay? An okay way for us to try to have a family? And one of the decisions we went through at the very get-go was that we would, any embryo that we created in this process, we would give a chance of life.
Mm.
And that's something that we are still committed to. So yeah, we still have two frozen that we hope that they will become other children. We will definitely give them a chance to do that. They are of the same quality of all the ones that we lost before. Eli and Emmy were our best two embryos that we ever produced. But so we shall see. The jury's still out on those.
Well, that's amazing. That's awesome. So man, I didn't even think about you having two. So now I'm just two more. So now I'm just kind of blown away by the fact that you might possibly have four babies soon. But
Mhm.
so what?
Yes, me too.
When you found out that you were finally pregnant and that you weren't pregnant with just one but two, did that even cross your mind at that point, or were you like, oh my gosh, like two, or were you just like just ecstatic at the fact that you just were pregnant in general?
Ecstatic that I was pregnant in general. I felt like um, we could totally handle two. There was still that fear there. I'd had another friend that I had walked through this journey of infertility with, and she sadly had lost one of her twins in her first trimester, and so that was still definitely a reality too for me. It was very fresh on my mind, her having walked through and grieved with her through that experience, and so my prayer immediately began of just Lord protect both of them, and just I was anxiously awaiting to get through that first trimester where you feel a little bit safer of actually saying, okay, yes, we have two, and
Right.
they're both probably going to make it, and stuff like that. And so for us, I never had any qualms, doubts, fears, concerns about having two. We were just so grateful that we were able to get pregnant. And what's so funny is, and I wrote down here um, in my notes that we prayed for just one child. We to look like us, to come from us, and in our wildest dreams did we ever think that we would get two. We thought, okay, if this IVF process will just yield us one, then we're definitely open for adoption, to go get a sibling and to build our family. We didn't necessarily want an only child for our family, and so our prayer was just for one, and God gave us two. And for me, what that tells me and is that God's plans are so much bigger than anything I could ever dream.
Mm-hmm.
My prayers were so small in comparison to what God had for me that it just proved to me that He really does have bigger plans in mind for each of us. And sometimes we just have to step back and let God drive, because He's so much bigger than anything we could ever imagine or dream or want or ache for.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that.
I think it's definitely, and I think it's hard for us to even to feel hope, or sometimes we let fear control things to where we forget, who's ultimately in control, and yeah, definitely fear and just being afraid of getting your hopes up to where, like you said, you were just saying, if we could just have at least one, like you weren't even trying to entertain the idea of any more than that, because I felt like even one might have felt impossible to you at this point. So you were just
Mm-hmm.
hoping for like the least. But yeah, yeah, that's the truth, that he definitely has bigger plans than we could ever imagine.
And I still, all those precious babies and those five embryos that didn't yield into a pregnancy for us. I mean, I love them, and forever in my heart they are my children. For a moment in time they were inside of me, and but without their loss and their failure to survive, then I would never have, you know, Elijah and Amelia. And they are I can't imagine what our life would look like without them. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, sometimes, and without, if any of those others had worked, we probably would have never got, Eli and Emmy. And so it just proves that, in the pain, there is a redeemer, and there is redemption, and the Lord, he knows the inner desires of your heart. And um, the theme for us, through our whole entire process, and actually when we announced our pregnancy in the pictures, we use this verse, and it's Mark 11:24, and it says, "Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours." And through just the whole process, we knew that the Lord was going to grant us our prayer. We knew that we would have a child. We just didn't know when and how that was going to look like. And it really it tested and stretched our faith. And we talk about kids going through growing pains. Well, growing pains are painful and they're uncomfortable. And I think that most of the times when we grow in our faith the most is when we're uncomfortable and it's painful, and everything's not going the way we think it should, because then we feel like we need to lean into God and lean into this higher power, because we are we're out of control and we're out of our comfort zone, and that's really where the growth happens.
Yeah. Well, you were talking about earlier how you and TJ went through counseling, and so just out of curiosity, what were some of your guys' darkest moments going through this process, and how did you guys fight against the kind of strain that was putting on your marriage and your busy lives?
Right. I really cannot speak for him. For me, and I think a lot of women who struggle with infertility, you feel broken. The Bible references children as a gift of God, and so therefore you feel unworthy. You feel forgotten. And those are all just lies that the devil tells you. They really are. And you can get those, you can self-talk your way into those. Right. It's very easy because you think my body's not working the way it should, right? So I'm not holding a child, I'm miscarrying, I'm not, all sorts of things. You feel broken. You're not working the way you should, right? So it's very easy to fall into that trap. And I, for me, I was there. I had done that downward spiral, to the point where I'd gotten, sorry, this is extremely hard to talk about. That's okay. I mean, I'd gotten to the point of, is this worth living?
Were you able to tell anybody about your feelings, or at this point is it just kind of bottled up inside?
I mean, I felt pretty comfortable talking to TJ, but really no one else. And so he was very aware, but I'd probably say that's where we really started. That's when for me, I hit rock bottom, and we really started seeking counseling together. And it wasn't really because we weren't getting along and that our marriage was tough, because honestly, I think our marriage, we drew closer because we really leaned into one another. We circled our wagon, if you will. Because we really felt like we were the only ones who understood what we were going through. I mean, like, you talk to your parents. My mom has 2 kids, myself and my brother, so she doesn't really understand what this is like, and she doesn't know what to say. And your friends are getting pregnant, and so they don't really understand, and so you just feel alone in that. And so for us, we really actually leaned into one another. But counseling for us was because I had gotten to a point where I didn't know how I was going to survive that. And that was probably my lowest point in going through this. And ultimately, at that point in time, infertility had almost become an idol. And I've actually made a list of how you can pray through infertility that we can talk about in a little bit. But because it can become, because you go to the doctor, I mean, every other day, you're doing all these meds, and your whole entire schedule and your world revolves around these doctor's appointments and these medications and where you're at in your cycle. And it can very easily become the focus of everything you are. And it had become an idol for me. And so I need to go, talking with the counselor and having that space and time to discuss some things and some feelings with my husband, with a little bit of a facilitator. And this facilitator had gone through infertility herself and had actually never gotten pregnant. They ended up adopting. And so she was very aware of how to get us. And that was also my process, is I needed to talk to someone to get to that point where, if this doesn't work, how are we going to build a family? What am I going to be okay with? What,
Right.
Can I adopt? And so that was really what seeing a counselor was for. But
Yeah, you just
I hope
kind of,
that answers your question.
yeah, no. And I bet it was helpful to see somebody like come out on the other side, even like you
Mm-hmm.
said, as she did through adoption. So it was kind of a affirmation. And like, if she, if she did it and she is not broken, then
Mm-hmm.
I won't always feel this way, or I won't always be broken, no matter which route I go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But that's, that was definitely the lowest point where of the process, and those feelings, and they are the devil's lies. And um, you know, women, you're not broken, you're not unworthy, and you're not forgotten.
Yeah.
In all actuality, God has actually entrusted you to travel a very difficult journey,
Yeah.
and to travel it with grace. And your faith will be tested, and you will find that you're being trusted to search for a higher calling.
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like will be individual to your own story. For me, it's sitting here talking with you today, Ashley. This has become a ministry opportunity for me. This is something that I enjoy doing, is taking my pain and my experiences and breathing hope and perseverance into other women who are starting out or in the middle of this horrible rocky road. And that's where I ended up, but it was not without um, time and pain and
Yeah.
suffering.
Right. And so going back to what you said, how do you pray through fertility and not letting it become an idol?
Absolutely. So the first one is, and I, how much time do we have left? I don't know.
I mean, you're good. You can go as long as you want.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, but first of all, praying that God will center your marriage on Him and strengthen your relationship with each other. Um, that you ask God to keep this trial from straining your marriage. So there's amazing power in prayer, and God responds to very specific prayer, and you can pray protection over some things that are going to affect your marriage, and infertility is one of those. And so that's starting one. Just pray that it will not affect your marriage and that you'll lean into one another. The second one is just praying that the Lord will reveal His plan for your infertility to you, and that He would allow you to see His purpose even in small ways. Some verses that really correspond with this one for me is Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, and plans to give you a hope and a future. Also Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. The third one is praying that God will give you wisdom and discernment for advice from doctors and friends that you have. They all have a loving heart and they want to offer advice, but ultimately you have to decide what is going to work best for your family and for your finances. And you're getting a lot of information from a lot of different places, and everyone's just trying to be helpful, but you really, really need God's discernment as to what you're willing to put yourself through, and where God really wants you to take this road of infertility and how you build your family.
Yeah.
Ephesians 4:14 through 15 kind of talks about this is we are no longer to be children, tossed here and there by waves, carried about every wind of doctrine, by the trickery of men, by the craftiness and deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects of him who is the head, even Christ. What's amazing, I love the priesthood of the believer because I can open my Bible at all these different seasons in life and read verses that are so familiar and so comforting and that we have been studying our whole entire lives, and they speak different meaning and they breathe new life into where you are in that season of your life. And that's the beauty of God's word, is that he doesn't ask you to get your stuff together and to come to him. Then he says, I'm going to meet you where you're at. You're suffering and you're weary and you are tired, and I'm going to give you a gift of encouragement through my word. And that's the best thing about using God's word when you're going through this process, is that it's true and it's pure, and it can take on that shape and the meaning of meeting you right where you're at on your road. The next one is praying that God will not allow a root of bitterness or jealousy to grow in your heart toward others that have children. It's just so important that, you can become jealous or resentful of others, or even just seeing people that have children that don't treat their children very nicely or abuse their children, and it makes you angry because you just want children and you ache for them, and to see people who can just toss that away so flippantly. And so you have to really guard your heart against that, because you can become very bitter and resentful. Praying that God will produce in you and your spouse patience and character during this trial. One of our things that we really strove to do was that through our experience, people would see God's grace in us, and that we would handle this, our sorrow and our grief, very graciously. I don't think that we did that perfectly 100% of the time. I think there were moments where I definitely was not as graceful as I should have been. But that was our prayer, and that's what we aimed to do. Romans 5:3-5 says, "We will also rejoice in our suffering, because we know that our suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us." And it does. It breeds perseverance, because you just have to keep going. I mean, you have this ultimate goal, and you have to continue of, to be totally honest with you, when we did that third IVF, at that point, I didn't think it was going to work anymore. I had already decided in my heart, and I don't know if that was me just protecting my heart, but I was like, this is going to work. So I had already found an adoption agency. I had all the paperwork filled out, and I had been saving the money. So I had the initial fees to start the adoption process. That is where I was at. So I had, the perseverance of, okay, if this doesn't work, we have to keep going. We could be still waiting a year to build our family through an adoption process. But once again, okay, this is the plan that God has for us, and we are supposed to adopt a child, and by all means, let's push on further. So perseverance and character.
Oh my
gosh. Next one is praying that God will give you his strength as you see infertility from a kingdom perspective. 2 Corinthians 4:16-8 says, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and our momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So fix your eyes not on what is to be seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but for what is unseen is eternal." And for me, that verse just helped me focus on the fact that this is so much bigger than me. Yes, this might be the biggest thing in my world, but this is not, ultimately, God is bigger than all of this. he came here and died and saved us from our sins, and he did it for every single one of us. And that ultimately is the bigger picture. And so for that was just kind of kept my perspective on what is my purpose here on earth. My purpose isn't necessarily to just have this selfish ambition of I want to have this child and whatnot, but what is the Lord preparing me for his kingdom to be like? What is he trying to teach me? So that was just one of the other things that we really tried to focus on while we were going through this.
You're definitely very strong. This is definitely a marathon run, and I would be like passed out at mile 3. Like,
No. Oh, you say that, but no,
yeah,
you wouldn't.
yeah,
Not at all. Because, you look at your children's faces today and you think, gosh, I would do anything. And I look at my kids and I was like, oh my gosh, I would go back and do it 10 times over if I knew that this was the end result.
yes,
And I hope that women out there, that you can cling to that, and the fact that if you really choose and you want to be, a parent, and you're open to however that looks for you, in God's plan, and the way what he's got planned for you, then you would go back and you would do every hard thing. You would do every shot. You would take every pill and go to every doctor's appointment and be uncomfortable over and over again to see the end result. And I would do it. That's just how I feel. I would do it 10 times over again and more to get to look at my children's faces.
That's definitely a truth right there.
So, I mean, there's just so many ways that, you can just pray through this, and those are some of the biggest ones. I have a ton more, but,
Yeah.
Those are the biggest ones, and just, using the Bible to find verses that you can focus on. And for us, we wrote them on sticky notes and we put them in the nursery of the room that was supposed to be the nursery, and we stuck them in between our mattresses, and we put them in places where we just wanted that to be our focus.
Yeah. How did
you just got to find what kind of works for you.
How did you guys protect the intimacy aspect of your marriage going through all this as well? Because I know that a lot of women or couples, when they start going down this journey, it becomes more of a sort of, and I hate to use this word, but I can't think of another word, but like a robotic, kind of thing where it's like, this is what we have to do. And like, it's like at this time, and, and so how do you protect that part of your marriage?
Yes. So yes, in the beginning, when you're just kind of taking Clomid and you're trying to have this timed intercourse, and so it's like, okay, today, tonight, oh, and tomorrow,
Right.
and yeah, that can get a little, exhausting, I guess is the
Yeah.
right word. Because it feels forced at that point. I think
Right.
at that point in time when you're just starting out, it doesn't feel that forced. And so once again, you have to give sense of humor to the situation, and you just get creative. So ladies, you dust off the lingerie that you haven't worn in 5 years since your honeymoon. And Ashley, we're really getting real here
Yeah.
tonight. So you dust off the lingerie, and you just try to make it as fun as possible. And of course, you're going to have the days where, something happens, or your husband has to travel, or y'all had a really bad day at work, and, you just have to do something together that makes life fun, whether that's just playing a game or, snuggling on the couch or something like that, just to kind of help you get to that point. And so it doesn't feel so forced. When you start actually having treatments and they're taking a lot of that responsibility off of your plate, actually for us, that's when we kind of got to lighten up a little bit. And then it once again it wasn't so important that we're having this timed intercourse, because we're they're actually taking sperm and eggs and doing all that in a petri dish at that point. So
Right.
it kind of relieves you from having that forced intimacy, and you can kind of go back into just your normal
Yeah.
routine, whatever that looks like for you and your husband.
Right.
So, I mean, for us, it was just kind of going through that. When you're sad and you're grieving, of course, life's not fun in general, but everyone kind of handles that differently in the intimacy of their own marriage. So I would just suggest open communication, talking about it, explaining like why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and what sex and intimacy looks like for each of you during those times. I think just having a conversation about it and laying it all out there, which husbands and wives should be able to do, really kind of clears the air and relieves each other of expectations. Because expectations is kind of where marriages get in trouble anyways.
Right.
And so I think when you just have that understanding, you've already built intimacy right there, just in having that real conversation about where you're at and what sex means to you in that moment. So I think just communication. I know everyone always says communication, but it really is the truth. And sometimes those conversations are difficult to have, but you have to keep the end goal in mind of what are we doing here? We're trying to build a family. Well, on the other side of this, of trying to build a family, we still want to have a family intact, right?
Right.
That gets along and is healthy, and conversation is always a healthy way to start a marriage and have intimacy.
So I know that you gained 2 beautiful children from this journey, but were there any things that any other beautiful, maybe conversations or milestones or light that was shown going through this hard journey that were like maybe conversations that you guys were forced to have that wouldn't have had otherwise, or could you see any sort of like light going through this journey?
Yes. So what I gained from this was a huge change in perspective of how I think as women, we naturally have a tendency to compare and to measure our lives, our situations to other women.
Yeah.
And I had a really, really great friend who had walked this road of infertility before, and she ended up having 2 beautiful children herself. And someone had shared this with her, and basically what she said one day when I was complaining and not really having a healthy perspective on this, she said, everyone has their problems. She goes, everyone's marriage has something going on in it. That couple over there, they've got financial issues. That couple over there is struggling. One of them struggling with infidelity. So, that woman has a cheating husband, and that one over there, they have a job loss in their family, and they're only living off one income, and that's not their choice. And ours was infertility. And so she just said, everyone has their problems, and your problem of infertility is no different. It's no greater. It's no less than their problem. It's just what yours looks like, and theirs looks differently. And from that moment, it completely changed my perspective on comparing and trying to look at other people's marriage and, well, they can have kids easy, so they must have no problems at all. Well, that's not true.
Yeah.
Their problems just take on a different form. And so for me, that just changed how I approached the situation. And once again, it goes back to that women just giving each other grace, to come and to meet each other where you are at, and to just be and to love on one another, because we all got our problems, and they don't all look the same, and one is not greater than the other. They just are what they are. So that was a big one for me. And in fact, that perspective has just carried on through many other different scenarios and different aspects of my life. And you can apply it to almost any situation. So that for me was a huge, huge turning point, actually, in how I saw our infertility.
That's powerful.
Um,
That's an awesome thing and I love how it's kind of awesome how God puts people in your life to kind of speak truth and the right thing to say that
mhm,
just sort of transforms your, like you said, your perspective or your outlook on things, or just kind of makes you stop and think, like, otherwise you wouldn't have stopped and thought about, how you're feeling. You just keep going and, but yeah, to say the right thing at the right time.
mhm.
That's just awesome. I did have a question about, did you think that, I know you said you guys, you had changed your lifestyle before the third round. Do you think that that had any impact on your guys' results at all? Or do you not, are you like kind of not sure, but like, you know,
I don't think we'll ever know.
yeah,
There have been, some studies done on how to improve egg quality. Um, taking CoQ10, which is a completely, over the counter kind of supplement, fish oil. Um, so there's all sorts of things out there. Also, our third round, I took like 81 milligrams of aspirin to basically thin my blood, hoping that it would be able to embed itself in the uterine lining easier if I had like a really thick uterus. I mean, it was just a whole bunch of different things. I think for me, because I am extremely, and you can appreciate this, I am a type A personality.
yeah,
And infertility took all control from me, right? So
right,
my whole entire life, I have been taught that if you work hard, you can achieve anything, right?
mm-hmm.
That's what our mommies and daddies told us girls growing up. If you want something, then you just have to work hard and you can get it.
Right,
Well, in infertility, A plus B does not always equal C.
right,
You can do everything right and, take all your meds at the exact right time, and it still may not work.
mm-hmm.
And um, so for me, changing our lifestyle and, our diet and, using organic cleaners and not pumping my own gas. I mean, those things I think made me feel more in control because I
Mm-hmm.
was able to control those things.
Right,
I was able to control what I put in my mouth and, ate and what I did and what I cleaned my house with and whatnot. So I really cannot say for sure that that was the deciding factor. But for me, it just gave me some sense of control in a very uncontrolled environment. So for my own sanity,
yeah.
that's what worked for me.
That makes sense, though. I could see, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and every doctor is going to tell you something different and they have different experiences. And I
mm-hmm.
mean, you really just have to, if you're going to go down this road, you have to find a doctor that communicates well with you and can walk you through this. And then ultimately, you've chosen him to be your medical, person. And so you've got to trust what he asks for you. And it's, our doctor kind of explained it to us as a little bit of white magic, right? So what works for someone over here is not necessarily going to work for someone
Right,
over there. I had a friend who was going through this at the time, and her doctor in San Antonio introduced the idea of embryo glue. It really is a thing. Um, and it's supposed to help the embryo adhere to the uterine lining to help with implantation. And I asked my doctor about that, and he goes, "Well, I mean, we have some, we can use it." He goes, "I don't think it's going to make that big a difference, but if it make you feel better, we can try to." I mean, they're pretty
yeah,
much open to anything because it's, ultimately it's kind of out of their control too.
yeah,
They're doctors facilitating this medical knowledge that can help you reach your goals, but ultimately, the power of life and death is in God's hands,
right,
not a doctor's. And as we have learned,
right,
so
yeah. Well, yes. Well, before we go on,
Mhm.
did you have anything else that you wanted to
Hmm.
go through before we go on to my last three questions?
No, I think I'll cover everything in your last three
Okay.
questions. I feel like I just had so many notes, and I'm sure I've covered it all. I hope that I hope that at some point this my story and what we've been through, reaches someone and gives someone hope or at least comfort or perspective or um, or whatnot. I mean, that's really the purpose of this
Yeah.
and this ministry, and my story is to hopefully I can teach someone else to really lean into God um and just use him. He's there for you to lean on and to comfort you and to get you through probably one of the hardest things you will go through in life.
Hmm.
It's not easy, and
Yeah.
I hope I can just offer that hope to at least one other woman out there.
Well, I know that you will. And I just want to acknowledge you before we go on, in that, man, I am watching you guys. Like, I got to see part of your journey through this, and I definitely had admiration for how strong you were. But yeah, you are a warrior. A warrior mother is what comes to mind. Just fighting for the lives of your sweet babies that I've gotten to see you guys love on and grow with you guys on Facebook has been amazing. And I'm grateful that you came on to bring hope to infertility to other women, to share your story, to be brave about that, to be open and willing to cry on, with me. And yeah, I'm just grateful for you as a friend. And so thank you for sharing your story.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So what is the most influential book that you have read?
I've read a lot of really influential books, but as it pertains to this topic,
Yes.
um, so for me, during this whole process, because our infertility journey was over the course of um, really 2 years, which doesn't seem that long in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like eternity.
Right.
And there are seasons in that where you feel very dry emotionally and spiritually. And I had a really sweet friend give me a book of devotionals. It's called Streams in the Desert, and it's by L.B. Coman, Cowman. And they're simple. There's a reading for um, every single day. It's like a little short story and a verse to meditate on. And each one is really about perspective and how God is there and He's our hope and He's our future. And if there were days where I did not have the strength to open my Bible because I was, angry or sad or all those human emotions that we experience, I would always pick up this first thing in the morning before I'd even get out of bed and at least do this. It was one verse, one short story to just help me set my focus and get myself ready for the day. So for me, it's Streams in the Desert because it's typically for someone who's grieving, for who's going through something. It explains itself as for weary desert travels. And it's just enough water to kind of get you through the next day. Because really, that's what it is. It is a day by day experience. One morning, you're going to wake up and you're like, I feel fine. This is no big deal. The next day, your whole world is wrecked. And there's nothing that happened except that you got, I don't know, 6, 8 hours of sleep. And so for me, it was just enough of God's word to keep me going and to keep me focused when I had no strength to do anything else. I mean, honestly, Ashley, I got to a point where I didn't even know what to pray anymore. I talked about prayers that we had used to get ourselves through infertility, to protect our marriage against infertility. But really, I got to the point where I was like, I don't even know what to pray for anymore, Lord. And you know what's great about that is He's fine with that because He knows our heart and He's okay with that. And He says, you know what? That's okay.
Yeah.
I'll pray for you and I'll cover you with prayer on your behalf because I see you. I see you exactly where you are, my daughter. And He does. And so I would come to Him and be like, Lord, I have nothing left to pray. You know what I want. You know what I desire. You know what we're working toward here. And I have nothing else to say. And He's okay with that.
Yeah.
So that was for me kind of what got me through.
Yeah.
when I was too weak and too weary to pick up anything else. Devotional streams in the desert.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I know that that'll be a super powerful resource for somebody. And so I'm glad that that person, again, like that's just one thing that, that person was, felt called to gift that to you. And, like that just happened to be the exact thing that you needed at that exact time. So,
Yes.
yeah. If you could empower women in one way, what would it be?
To just recap what I mentioned earlier about how I'm going to speak directly to you, women, that you're not broken, you are not unworthy, and you are not forgotten. That those are the devil's lies. And you really have been entrusted by your Lord and Savior to travel this journey and to do it with grace. That your faith will be tested and that you will find that you are being trusted to search for a higher calling. That he's going to use this pain and he's going to use your circumstances for his glory and his kingdom. You just need only to seek him and he will give you that direction. 1 Peter 1:7 says that so that your genuine faith, which is more valuable than gold, that that perishes when tested by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus the Messiah is received. And your beauty and your worth is not wrapped up in gold and earthly treasures of this world, but it's in your inner character, and it's how God sees you, and he sees you as beautiful and as whole, and he sees you as his own daughter.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope that they get out of this, is that you are loved and that he's right there with you.
If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
My younger self probably wouldn't listen to my older self, but we can try.
Yes.
So, I would tell myself, I'm a planner, so going back to the whole type A, I totally own that. The best thing about being in my 30s now is I'm actually getting comfortable with who I am. And so, I would tell myself to make plans, but to just be more flexible, because God's plan is so much bigger than anything that I could ever dream. My prayers are so small compared to what he has in store for me, that really at this point in time, I'm another story for another day, but I've chosen to be, a working mom, to have a career and a family. And I can tell you that right now I don't have a plan for really what that looks like. And I have chosen to not make a plan. I am literally allowing God to just work through that and to make that look the way he wants that to look. I'm trying to really relinquish that control to him, because that is definitely the lesson that I learned through infertility, is that I really don't have a clue what I really want. Because if I had just gotten what I wanted, I would only have one child.
Yeah.
And I have two. I have a boy and a girl. And so what he has and what he dreams for me, I want that. I don't even want what I want anymore, because what he's got for me is so much better. And so that's what I would tell my younger self, and really hope that she would listen to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is. Yeah, when you said that, that was like a ton of bricks like pressing on me, like, yes, I need to. That was definitely something that I need to do, looking inward in myself as well, is to relinquish that control. Because yeah, it just really hit home when you said, like, if it was my choice, I would have one, but I have two. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I cannot imagine life without either of them. It's
Right.
like they've always been here. It's what they were always. We are what we were always meant to be.
Yeah.
And my prayers were so small. And I'm tired of doing things my way. I want what he wants for me, because if it's anything like Amelia and Elijah, I want it all.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to wait forever and go through literally hell and back
Yeah.
to get what he wants from me. So,
Well, I'm so glad that you did. You have beautiful babies.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story and talking through something that is commonly not talked about, like we were talking about earlier before we got on, just to bring light to, infertility in general. So hopefully more women can talk more openly about it. And those of us that aren't going through it can support our friends better. Because now I'm trying to think back. Like, oh, did I, like, when you said the things not to say, I'm like, oh crap, did I say those things? Like, I hope not. She's probably talking to me right now, right? No.
No.
So
I do not remember anything specifically that anyone said to me. It's just, everyone wants to be like, they don't know what to say. And so
yeah,
they fall back on, cliches, and no one in particular said any wrong or anything.
right.
It's just, you did fine and you were wonderful. And just to affirm you, Ashley, I mean, I don't even know. I met you when Brinley was like 1 and she's 6 now.
Yeah, she'll be 7 in
Right?
March. Yeah.
7. Okay. So I've kind of gotten to know you over the past 6 years. And can I just say that the woman I met is not the woman I am talking to today, that you have grown exponentially in your faith, in your walk with God, in your marriage, and how you deal with people and your surroundings. And it's been very intentional by you. You have intentionally chosen to work on things and to develop yourself. And can I just say, as from another woman, just to praise you, that I'm proud of you. And you have just, you're wonderful. And you really are, um, just showing Christ's love through your ministry and what you're doing through your blog and your podcast. And I'm just really, really proud of you and the person that you have transformed into. And there was nothing wrong with you when I met you. I'm just saying, it's been amazing to watch how you've grown and how God has used you and your family. And it's wonderful. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. That means a lot. And now you're making me emotional over here. But
That's
no,
okay too.
yeah. No, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. But yes, so all of your resources and all of the scripture that you shared in your devotional and anything else you could think of, I will post on, for each episode, I put out a show notes page for, each podcast episode. So that will be up forever, hopefully. And it'll be there for anybody to search for, and they can use it as hopefully kind of a light in their journey as well. So thank you for sharing all your information in your sweet, beautiful family's journey with us. And yeah, thanks for taking the time with me.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. To give hope out of pain. That's the purpose. So,
As a mother, you can sort of imagine the grief or relate to somebody who is going through something like infertility, but nothing compared to what Nikki shared with me have I ever been able to feel like I really fully grasp the concept of what somebody has to go through on all levels. We as women not only have to change during pregnancy and our body goes through crazy things in order, to birth a baby, but for women with infertility, their body goes through so much more just to have a baby. And you guys are warriors. In the show notes, I've listed all the prayers that Nikki talks about that she found helpful with the relating scriptures. I've posted those on there. So if you go to todayseden.com/podcasts with this S at the end, podcasts/014, you will find those resources along with the devotional she mentions in her episode. So if you need those, they are there for you. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that it brought some unity, some understanding, and maybe some comfort to you today. So with that, I'm going to end with this quote by Brene Brown, and it says, "The two most powerful words when we are in struggle, me too."